We first interviewed one of the British Army's elite super soldiers, John Urwin, in late 2010. Now, in Bases 13, we revisit John in his home in Newcastle, where he reveals for the first time that the British officer who recruited him into the 16 may not have been human. The 16 were also after ancient, possibly alien crystal energy weapons technology, some of which they recovered in Jarabah, described in part 2. With his dear wife ill in hospital, we give you John Urwin and One Step Beyond the 16.
Well, with John Urwin on part 2. And what further things did Ken, the officer, tell you about how various groups of humanity came to the earth?
Well, I was led to believe that they came here in various stages. That the white race was here in the very beginning, and then the other races arrived in various different stages. And this is what he was talking about when he was talking about this is why they call them the third world. But they're trying to change the meaning of it now today, you know. But the main reason why they call them the third world, because apparently they were from different planets, 3 planets, is why they call them the third worlds.
What 3 planets?
Well, I don't know.
Did Ken not say
3
anything
planets.
more about that?
No, well, he did at the time, but don't forget, it's 50 odd years ago.
Well, what can you remember Ken told you?
All I can remember is that he didn't get into that area too much, right? He just said that we're different because we're from different atmospheres, from different planets. And when they were brought here as their vessels of what they used to look like, apparently.
So what do you mean how his place used to look like?
Well, they brought the DNA of the vessels to this planet.
So I just want to be clear here. We are now saying that Ken, a British military officer, is actually an extraterrestrial of some form.
I have no idea. All I can say is he was different in lots of ways. You know.
Okay, apart from his eyes and his skin, what else?
Just his mannerisms. When he moved, he seemed to move a bit like a robot, if you like. He sort of looked at you in a strange way. He didn't sort of just do that and look at you. He sort of turn around and he seemed to be looking through you all the time. You see, and then
is that because his eyes weren't looking at you? Is that because his eyes, in the way if somebody's looking past your shoulders, there's a subtle difference in the eyes?
Yeah. Like I said, look as though he's looking through you when he's talking. But there were sometimes he really put himself out to try and act like the others. In other words, you know, you crack a joke and...
So he was forcing himself
to
he
seemed to be forcing himself to sort of join in. Do you understand? But it didn't seem right somehow when he did it. You know, there's something you couldn't...
I mean, are we talking about the normal British officer with a stair rod on his back, you know?
Yeah, well, he wasn't like that. He was...
stiff upper lip, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he would talk in different slangs. All of them would. They would even copy the Geordie slang. When I used to ask them where they were from, they used to make jokes about it, and they used to change the accent. You see, and they would sound like as though they were from Liverpool or from London, and they really have you confused. They didn't want you to know where they came from.
Well, that was a technique used in a bank robbery in Northern Ireland when there was something like £40 million stolen.
Well, I don't think it was them
that
did it.
No, but it was that technique where the robbers used different accents to confuse where they're from. So finally, what did Ken say about the races on Earth? That they came from different places.
Yeah, they came from different places.
Did he tell you how he knew about that?
Well, again, I was only 18. I hardly ever went to school. I didn't know how to approach the guy. I didn't know what to say to him, to be honest with you. And I used to just say, well, what do you mean? That's all I used to say. And he just said, look, well, one day you're going to find out. And I said, find out about what? He says, well, everything out there is not what they've made you believe them to be. And we just say, like I said, they said, when they talk about the third worlds, they mean the third planets. And, and he used to say, well, look, let's get off the subject and get back onto, planning these operations, But anyway, I was led to believe that all the races are like the way we are because we're from different places. Do you understand? And the reason why they were brought here, because they wanted to start from the beginning again, because that's how can I explain this? The aliens look the way they look because of time. They changed. And they wanted to go back. And as far as I understand as well, a lot of them can't have children like what they used to look like. So they
This is what Ken told you.
This is what Ken told us. So this is why they have abductions now and again, and that's the only way they can have. In other words,
This is what Ken told you.
Yeah, vessels. They brought us here, so we have children, so they can now and again they can take the woman out or whatever, and they can impregnate that woman, so they can have. They can reproduce, you see, because apparently they have a great deal of trouble in reproducing in space because there's, the energies, all our energies are trapped within the Earth's energy. You can't get out of there. So when you're in space, apparently, this is what I've been told, whether it's true or not, I don't really know, but it's what I was told by Ken. In space, you can't have kids. And the reason why you can't have children in space is because then the energy is not about. So if you have a child in space, you have a dead child. So they do. So this is why they have to have a planet.
Or you have a soulless child. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, not be born dead. It won't be able to move. It can't operate. It hasn't got a soul to drive the body. Do you understand? There'll be nothing wrong with it, in a sense, but it will just die. So it'll be born alive, but it'll not have a brain, it'll not have anything operating it. Do you understand?
So the Earth...
In other words, it'd be just like a car. If you got in a car, if you didn't get in a car, for all the cars got the fuel and the engine, but if nobody that start the engine up and drive it, it's dead. But it's not until somebody gets in it. Well, it's a bit like that with the vessels, apparently. So they have trouble. This is why they keep kidnapping women and impregnating them or experimenting on them, because they want to see how it's proceeding, how it's working.
So this is what Ken told you at the first time you were...
No, this was after a while, after I'd been through all the training, and I did some... I used to bring the subject up now and again when I had time to think about it, when I wasn't really concerned in the operation we're going to do the next day, then.
Okay, the operations.
Yeah.
What was your target?
Well, I'm
not talking about specific things. What was the main reason for the elite?
The only time
16,
that I met up
16.
with most of the elite, there was 16 of us, okay? And the only time I met up with around about 12 of us, the 16 was in operation, but don't forget, half the 16 are intelligence. In other words, it's not like today where we have the modern technology. We didn't have anything. We didn't have, like I said, the use of mobile phones or satellites. So 8 of the 16 used to be in various different countries that we would be operating in at some time, you see. So these guys would plant whatever we needed, so we didn't have to carry it. So when we got there, we picked it up. Okay, and that's how it was done. But on the day of Jarabah, when we went into Jarabah...
Yes, but before we talk about Jarabah, what exactly was the function of
the object, the exercise? It was Jarabah when I found out what all the other missions had been about and not what they had told us about.
Okay, so
I was given the impression we were
Let's
just
talk
going to
about-
bump various people off, eliminate certain people because of...
Why? What had they done that they?
well, there
needed
were
to do
scientists that were going to introduce, as far as understood, nuclear... they were going to give other countries nuclear weapons at that stage. Don't forget, it's 1958 here. They didn't have them. And I thought that's what we were trying to prevent them from doing, but it had nothing to do with that. But I thought it was, so we were bumping off these scientists, and I thought that's why we were doing it. But I found out when we got to Jarabah, they couldn't keep it a secret any longer, because when we went to this big compound, this is where most of them met up. Some were driving trucks, delivering us, picking them up, dropping them off, delivering stuff, on this operation. So when we hit the camp in Jarabah, this compound in Jarabah, there was only one guy that actually went into the camp through this toilet.
Now, before we move
Do you
on,
want to explain
Jarabah
that?
doesn't exist anymore.
Jarabah didn't exist,
So
yeah.
you have a map there. Can you show us the map?
So even then, when I was out there, it didn't exist. It didn't exist then. Do you understand? It only existed. This is a map of the Middle East. This is Lebanon, Tyre, Israel. This is Syria over here. That's Syria down there. And this is Jarabah, the compound that we raided. It's very near the Syrian border, and at the time the Israeli border, and it's just on the other side of the River Jordan. Okay, it's about 3 mile or 4 mile, something like that, when you cross the River Jordan. Now, when we got there, we saw part of a village that had been flattened, literally levelled. You see, but don't forget, I wasn't there sightseeing. The object, the exercise, was to get these articles out of this compound, where these various officers and government officials were meeting in this building. But I still didn't know. I thought we were just there to eliminate these people who were at this meeting. It was when it's when they start talking about this. Don't forget it, and they would keep on saying it. Where will it be? And this is why I was listening. I mean, don't forget, I wasn't really important. I was on the sideline sort of thing. And I kept interrupting and said, "What's this it business?" And they just kept turning around and said, "Don't worry about it," But they kept on about it. It should be at the back of this office where they're having this meeting, and it's in this cabinet or whatever. And I kept on asking. I said, "Well, what's this it business?" And they said, "Just forget it. Just forget it." So anyway, one guy went into the camp through the toilets, through the wire fence, got into the toilets, and when he did that is when we opened fire up on the building. So when they opened fire on the building, the guy who was actually in the toilet, what happened was, one of the soldiers from the building came over to the toilets because they kept the toilet well away from the building for obvious reasons. When he entered the building, one of the lads were waiting for him, took him out, took his coat off him, then walked across the courtyard towards the two guards on the gate, on the door of this big building, right? It's a 2-story building. So when we opened fire, when he got near them, when we opened fire on the building, they switched the lights off and they dashed into the building. Well, he dashed in with them. He went straight upstairs along the corridor, and as far as I understand, he threw a grenade in there, and he got the things he was after, right? And when he came out, he was throwing grenades in the offices and things like this. So they had no idea that there was somebody actually in the building, they thought all attacks were coming from outside. So he literally could do what the hell he liked. You see? But anyway, when he got out of the building, I'll not go into that, into the full story of that. We got out of the building. There was nothing, you know, we're okay. Nobody got really hurt. We got across the River Jordan, and we knew they couldn't follow. They couldn't cross that part of the river. And when we got across, they were still on about, did you get it?
But you were able to cross it because of your special skills.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. A similar sort of way which we got from one building to the other without touching the barbed fence. You see, without anybody seeing we. Okay, so when we got across the other side of the river, and they were saying, did you get it? He said, yeah, it's in my bag. So they got the bag out, and they brought this little black box out about 9 inches, 10 inches long, 4 inches wide, about a couple of inches deep. And they were struggling trying to open it. And eventually, I think it was Dynamo, he took the box and he squeezed it and the damn thing opened. And when it opened, inside was a sort of a red violet velvet cloth material. And when you open it up, it looked, to me, it looked just like 2 bits of glass, but half an inch thick.
What shape? What shape were they?
Oblong, just an oblong bits of glass with chunks missing out the side of it. And down the centre was...
How long?
About 8 inches long, 4 inches wide, about an inch thick, half inch thick, whatever. Right? I only had a glimpse at them. They opened them up, laid them on the ground, and we shone them with torches on it. And when we did that, after a few seconds, they started to sort of glow, and we had these little white lights coming off them, like you would find in a dance hall. You know, these big domes, balls they have in the dance hall with all the lights flashing. Well, it was a bit like that.
Were they just lights or symbols?
Well, it just looked like lights.
Different colours?
Yeah, different colour lights was coming off them.
What type of colours?
Well, blue, green, you know, all sorts, just like rainbow, you know. Anyway, the strangest part about it is when we looked at them, they looked like as though they had green lines on them, something like you would find on a record, right? You could, you know, you could say that quite plainly. And I was about to touch them, and they stopped us. They didn't seem to touch them. They seemed to handle them with the material, wrap them and put them in a box. That was as much as I saw them. They put him back in the box, and we got what you call a runner. You give him to him, he looks like one of the natives, and he ran off with it. And I never knew what happened after that. And I was saying, you know, what are they? And I kept on all the time about, you know, what are they? And I heard them discussing it, say, well, at least we've got those two. The others won't work without them. And this was really, you know, it's starting to annoy me because I was keeping saying, what others? Well, and then one of them slipped up and said, well, the ones went to Egypt for we didn't get. I says, is that what I didn't know we're after them in Egypt. I thought we were after some documents and to get this guy in particular who was a sort of a scientist. And that's what I was told. But it wasn't for that. It was for these glass tablets.
So have you been told any more information about these glass?
Well, when I was on Richard D. Hall's program, and I mentioned it, and I think and I mentioned it to Kerry Cassidy as well. It was about then, which is about a year ago now, I think. I actually got a phone call because I wasn't sure what they were for. You know, I had some idea. They give us some idea. They were, you know, and I thought there was some kind of for some kind of energy weapons or whatever. But I had no idea. I still really don't. I had a phone call when he had heard me on this program, and he says, "Jody, I can only tell you this." Says, "You were right. They're all for energy weapons, but they're also to change dimensions. You know, different frequencies."
What do you mean? Explain that. I think you mentioned
Well-
something about realigning the dimensional portals on the Earth of some kind.
Yeah, and he mentioned something about the pyramids are 9 degrees out what they should be. And he was talking as though I knew something about it, but I didn't.
Now, when did they say? Is this last year?
This was about a year ago, yeah. And he said, listen, I can only say this, that they were for energy weapons and also changing dimensions, so through frequencies. And he
You
said,
you mentioned something about realignment.
yeah, he was talking about, don't forget this was just a few seconds on the phone. Excuse me. Hello?
So you were describing the true purpose of these pieces of glass.
Well, like I said, last year I got a telephone call off one of the 16. Right, now, you might ask, well, how did I know you were one of the 16? Because we'll have codes, you know?
yeah, and you've been
I knew
appealing
exactly
for them
who-
to get in contact, haven't you?
Pardon?
You have been appealing to get in
Yeah,
contact.
but you can imagine how old these guys are now. I mean, I'm 74, and these guys were a lot older than me, so they're going to be in that 80-something, okay? And I don't suppose they'll want anybody to know, you know, anything about them, because they're really top secret, these guys. It's not just a word. You know, it's not
Well,
like...
I have to say that I have other people who confirm this, that they're aware of what that device was, and it required 6 of these devices entirely to make it up.
Well, like I said, they probably know more than what I do. All I know was I saw them. What they actually did, I really no idea other than what I've been told. Now, I've been told off one of the 16 that it's for changing frequencies or dimensions. I suppose the way they were talking is it was some kind of a DVD that you stick in a machine and all this information comes off. That's the way I see them. Do you understand? But all of them, you need 6 of them to work together. Why, I have no idea. But I know that they were for something to do with energy weapons, which I'm sure that's what they used on the towers. They had to. Because, like I say...
We leave 9/11 out for the moment.
Okay.
But the point is, who is this? What you were told by Ken?
This was told by Dynamo.
Dynamo.
Yeah.
So it's Dynamo who phoned up.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, yeah, I'm sure it was, yeah.
Yeah. And were they to do with realigning things on the Earth's surface? What do you mean by 9 degrees out?
Well, you see, he was talking to me, so because I was on these particular programs, that I must know something about it. But really I don't, other than what, you know, I've heard on these programs, you know, about what the pyramids were for. There was lots of things they told me about the pyramids when I was there, you know, but they said it
Such
was...
as, what were you told about things?
Well, they were talking about how many there was across the earth, right? And there were...
How many are there?
Pardon? I have no idea, but I know there's quite a few of them, right? But he says, remember, see, I had forgot this until he phoned us up. He said, remember, they're dead. And I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, you remember? I said, well, I don't really. He said, well, we explained it to you. I said, did you? Yeah. They're 9 degrees out. I said, why? Oh, he says, just forget it. He says, look at the 9 degrees out. I said, okay, so you're talking about 9 miles out, you know, out of alignment. And that's why they're not working. That's why they're dead. You see? And that's what I was told. So other than that...
So the Earth's crust must have moved.
Well, something's happened. It's you know, it's either tilted or whatever. But I understand that, I mean, you're talking about thousands of years ago that these things were out of alignment. So I don't know what took place then. But he said that's why they're dead. They don't work anymore. And you won't get them to work because they're out of alignment, you know.
But could this machine, could this device...
They
get them to
had
work
something to
again?
do. No, they were a replacement. A sort of a replacement. In other words, they were using them to do a similar thing. But that's all I know. Really, that's all I know. I wish I knew more, but I don't. All I know that these glass, that's why there was 6 of them or something. that they're either placed somewhere or put in a machine somewhere.
Now,
I don't know.
were these two a pair, i.e., one of the devices?
There were 6 of these devices, but we only had 2 of them.
Right.
Right? Now, how they actually operated, whether they put them into something, I don't know. But they seem to, like I say, they seem to have some kind of energy when you shine a torch on them, or a flashlight, whatever you want to call them. They lit up. They literally lit up. Now, how they did that, I have no idea. All I was, when they did light up, I could see all these lines on them, like you would find on an old record, the old records. And there were fairly deep cuts on it, on these glass things. Again, I'm only guessing they were glass. They just look like glass. But that's all I can say, because I never actually touched them.
It could have been quartz crystal or something.
It could have been anything. All I know, they had little chips out the sides. In other words, they didn't have any sharp edges. You see, they just had these little chips out the side with these lines running down the middle. And I think it was these grooves that when the light was coming off them, they seemed to be crossing each other. And this is why they appear to be going around in a circle. But as soon as they did that, they said, "Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's them," and they wrapped them up.
When you were phoned, did they say what had happened to these in the present era?
No, not a thing. I was lucky to get that phone call, to be quite honest. I mean, it was out of the blue. I didn't expect them to break any rules in any way, shape or form, because they don't do that sort of thing. They're just saying you were struggling. We don't want to, they try and help a little way, but they wanted to help us, but they said that for changing frequencies and they've got something to do with energy weapons, and basically that's it.
Now, before you mentioned in your second edition of your book that before you went into Jarraba, you saw something else.
Yeah, before I went into Jarraba, I saw 2 large circular, what we know now as flying saucers. Don't forget, at the time I had no idea. I never heard about flying saucers before. Hadn't seen anything. So when I saw these 2 large objects taken off, which weren't making a sound, and it was a moonlight night, and I could, they were glittering in the sun, and they took off and they didn't make a sound. And when I said, "Oh, look at that," they told me to shut up. I never saw anything. Forget it. So they seemed to know, and not one of them looked up. Not one of my team looked up.
Can you describe these?
Well, like I said, they were
saucers?
typical as sort of, flying saucers. They were circular shaped objects, smooth, with...
I mean, this is a book. Were they anything like those?
Well, it was a bit like that, a very similar shape to that one there, except the bottom was more, it was more beveled at the bottom. At least that's what it looked like from where I was. Don't forget, I was about, a good mile away from them. But they were huge things,
So there were 2 missions there. A, to wipe out the meeting and all the civilians and military.
Yeah, it was members of the Bilderberg group plus military officers there. And the
Bilderberg group had only just really been formed at that time.
In 1954, that was only 3 years prior to us.
So this was a covert attack by a secret unit within the British Army, whose purpose was to circumvent and prevent progress by the Bilderbergers.
That's right. That's what it was all about, and prevent them from taking these tablets, these glass objects, away with them.
And those glass objects were delivered by 2 UFOs? Or...
Well, I cannot be 100% certain of that, but what we saw was 2 UFOs leaving the area as we were approaching the camp. So obviously they must have something to do with it.
So what the hell were these UFOs? Were they Nazi flying saucers or what?
Well, I wouldn't have thought so. These looked pretty, how can I put it, technical. They were. They weren't something that looked like, how can I explain it? These looked as though they were very old things, but
the UFOs?
high tech. It wasn't something that was like somebody trying to invent a bicycle or like a bone shaker. These were something that was obviously well made. They were very, very fast. In other words, it wasn't an experiment of any sort.
So the flying saucers, are we talking about the flying saucers?
Yeah, we're talking about the flying saucers. They were huge things, the size of a football field.
But they
And there
looked
was two of
old.
them. Yeah, yeah, they looked old. They were shining. There was lights on them, and like I said, they didn't make a sound. So I couldn't imagine any of us making something like that. I should imagine it'd be noisy or whatever. They wouldn't have been perfect, and these things were really perfect
So
in every sense of the word. And they're only
you mean by huge? What size?
What?
Okay, this is a book of Nazi flying saucers from the Second World War. Did the UFOs that you saw in 1957 look anything like those?
No, nothing at all. These look like toys. These look as though they're just experimenting. No, they look nothing like this at all.
Right, now if you flick through some of the pages, maybe this is it. Okay, what about...
Yeah, they look more like that. Yeah, I would say that they look very, very like that.
So what I'm essentially getting at here is, do you think that we were dealing with secret Nazi flying saucers involved with this meeting in 1957, and that you were circumventing the Bilderbergers, possibly were involved with secret Nazi flying saucers and maybe not alien?
I have no idea. I've really no idea.
But so the two objects that you saw
were gigantic. They were huge things. It was the size of a football field. They were, they were.
You saw them landed.
No, we saw them taking off. We didn't see them landing. They were taking off.
So they were taking off, but did you see them take off?
Yeah.
They
No.
off?
They came up from behind a hill, which was not far from the garrison.
And they looked that similar design.
Yeah, they were very, very similar to that, except the edge wasn't as sharp as that. They looked as though, I don't know, the distance I was looking at, they could have been a few feet wide, but that's what they really looked like. They looked very, very sharp. There was lights at the front, lights at the back, and these things took off and they didn't make a sound.
So I think the important thing is that we're not now, a lot of people think that the flying saucers are alien, but our major arguments, for instance, in today's paper, that due to a Finnish television program, that these obviously ones on the front cover are very primitive ones, but the ones that we've just seen there, you're saying are similar to the ones you saw at 57, taking off from the Jordanian desert.
That's right. Yeah.
And we were the purpose of this meeting was to circumvent a Bilderberger or Illuminati group which were going to completely change the Middle East. Well,
it was changing the whole world. It wasn't just the Middle East, it was changing the whole West. Yeah, I mean, at the time I didn't know what their plans. I was only a 19-year-old lad. I had no idea really what was going on. My job was to get there, and like I said, the other members of the another four members of the 16, they took charge of taking these people out and retrieving this box. From where I was, because they were enormous, and it appeared as they looked as though they had just taken off from the area that we were going to. Now, whether they did or not, I'm not sure, but they were coming from that area, and they were very, very low, going up into the air. So, like I said, it was a shock to me, when I saw them, and I was shouting, "Hey, look at those!" And they were telling me to shut up. You haven't seen anything, you see.
But the point about this is, what did they? You said they looked beaten, pretty used, or what kind of surface detail did they have? What sort of markings?
Well,
did they have?
they're very smooth. Do you understand? But they didn't look like something that was. How can I put it? When you say a second-hand car to a new car. I mean, they didn't look as though they were brand spanking new. Do you understand? There was something about them.
You must have been able to see them close enough to do that.
Well, they were huge. And it, like I said,
any
when they were
windows
taken off
or-
together,
Yeah.
they tilted over on the side, and that's when I had a pretty good look at them. There was lots of markings. I don't know whether these were actually portholes or whatever on the top, but they look like, there's something there, and they were jagged. So I couldn't make them out. I couldn't say they were dents or they're out of shape, but the rest of it was smooth. Do you understand? Away from the edges, they were very, very smooth and shiny when the moonlight was on them. So when they were taken off, you could see the centerpiece was very, very shiny, right? But the edges looked as though, I don't know, it was very, very hard to see. They looked jagged. It looked, I don't know. I mean, it might have been the shape of them, or I really don't
Was
know.
there any detail, any lights underneath them?
Yeah, there was colour lights. There was some
What
colour.
colours?
There was green and blue.
All round. What shape were they? Were in positions?
The colour lights were on the sides, right? There was about 3 or 4 different colour lights flashing on them. And then as they took off, they seemed to disappear. The lights seemed to disappear. Now, whether it was because the angle they were flying at, do you understand? Obviously, they changed direction, and the lights seemed to disappear.
Were the lights around the perimeter or the inside?
Around the perimeter, yeah. So, like I said, I was shocked when I was standing there with my mouth open. I didn't know what the hell it was. I'd never seen anything like it.
What, any symbols on them at all?
Like I say, it was too far away for seeing any kind of symbol on them. But they were enormous. And all I got was, you didn't say anything, forget it. And I brought the subject up again, and I got the same response.
Any noise?
No noise whatsoever. There wasn't even a breeze that night, so. But there was no noise whatsoever.
And how close to the Jarraba base were they?
Well, from where we were, I got the impression they were just a few hundred yards away from it. Because, I didn't know where the base was until we got there. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Oh, I had maps and things like that, but I still hadn't been, right? And don't forget, parts of that it's a beautiful place. There's lots of trees and, beside the river. It's a fantastic area.
And the river is?
The River Jordan. But the thing is, like I said, every time I mentioned the subject, they didn't want to know. They really didn't want to know.
And that was your final mission?
And that was the final mission, yeah. And
So-
it was then I found out that once we got them to objects, there's two, whatever you want to call them, everything seemed to come to a stop then. And that's when National Service finished. I was supposed to sign up for another 7 years. It's a good job I didn't, because the whole thing had to break up because all the troops were being taken from the Middle East and National Service was breaking up, you see. So I would have found myself I wouldn't have been with the 16 probably, because they had accomplished the exercise, do you understand? Because once they got these two what I think is glass objects, once they got them, they seemed to be quite happy.
So were you fighting for the Illuminati or were you fighting against the
Against
Illuminati?
them, against the British government,
So this is an elite British force.
who knew that the whole structure of Britain had been taken over by whatever. Well, this is it.
Because this is now bringing us right up to date.
Yeah, well,
What is the
Because-
British government being
Pardon?
taken? Who was the enemy?
well, it's like you say, it's the
Describe
money
the
people of
basic
the world.
philosophy.
Yeah, it's the money people of the world, the elite, the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call them, is actually in control now, which we all know. This is why we're forced into the European Union. Now I start to understand. I understand what they were talking about then, but at the time I really didn't. It's only now it's starting to I'm starting to realise what it was all about. You see, so like I said, this is why they want the European Union. This is why we're forced into the European Union. and it's illegal because of that. And this is why they're bringing down the countries, because it's a new world order, one world government. That's what they're after. Hence the towers coming down, hence the London bombings. Get everybody scared. Scare tactics.
So your basic training has a basic philosophy about how you adopt and deal with an enemy. Can you go through that procedure?
Well, I like to sort of keep that sort of thing, to myself. There is ways you can deal with a scenario like what's taking place now. But again,
I mean, there's something.
if you want the element of surprise,
you don't broadcast it all the time.
you don't broadcast it. No, yeah. Well, again, I know how to deal with the situation, but I really don't want to say it over the airways. But what we are saying is that the people who are trying to deal with what's taking place, they've got to do it in a different way, because the system itself, as you say, it's like common law, does not really exist. It's been taken over. And they want you to use the common law because in their eyes you're playing their game. So you're playing their game. As long as you're sticking to the rules, you're playing their game. And they'll twist it wherever necessary. In other words, they'll allow, if you take it as a gambling house, and you're in the gambling house, once you're in the gambling house and you go towards the tables, they're in control of the game, but they don't play the game. They let you play the game, and now and again they'll let you win because they want to keep you in the game to the point where they've got full control over you. And that's exactly what's taking place with common law, for instance. If you take common law and you start to use the law as a means of defending yourself, well, they don't go by that law, so that they can change it whenever they like. They can dismiss it whenever they like. Just like you say with David Kelly, for instance. When they mention David Kelly and they say, well, he was murdered, and you're trying to use the law to prove that, it's not going to work. That's why the government now, in this inquiry with David Kelly, they've put it back 70 years. That's so, imagine.
In other words, they can do what the heck they want.
They can do whatever they like. But as long as common law is being played out by common people, well, they'll let you do that. But as soon as you try and turn common law against the elite, well, it's not going to work. They'll do just exactly what they did to JFK. JFK, who was in power, right, who knew what was going on, and tried to do something about it. And what happened? They got rid of him. That's how powerful these people are.
And you're suggesting that certain other people who were doing something similar in this country may be under similar conditions.
Well, they all are, yeah. The whole structure of Britain now has been taken over by these people. That's why you've got, it's like I said, they've taken over the colleges. Like Oxford and Cambridge was taken over in the late 30s by the Tavistocks, the Tavistock Institute. Anyway, they took over the place like Oxford and Cambridge, because that's where the people are trained to go into government. So if you train them people to go into government, you're changing the government, and they get into British intelligence, such as Burgess McLean, Ken Philby, all of them were programmed to do that. Now, as you say, common law and the government has been taken over by these people. So you haven't got three parties, you've only got one party really, but they are just there to give you the impression you have a choice. You haven't got a choice, you never had one. So that's why we're in the European Union. That's why they can force you into the European Union. And none of them is trying to do anything about it. They only pretend to do.
And you had some certain instincts about 9/11.
Well, anybody with any common sense knows that aluminium airplanes can't cut through solid steel girders and concrete and do what they said they did. It's just not possible. And if you look at the buildings, they turn into dust. Now, I used to work for people like Tremblers who are demolition. I know what it takes to set up a building for demolition. It takes weeks. A lot of preparation. These buildings came down and they were dust. Not big solid pieces of concrete or steel girders. They came down as dust. And if you looked in the streets, there was paper everywhere that hadn't been burned. Thousands and thousands of paper lying all over that hadn't been touched. There was cars half a mile away that had been cut in half, burnt in half. How come? It's just not possible. They're obviously using an energy weapon. You can see the steel girders as the building collapses, and what steel girders were still standing literally turned to powder, turned to dust. You could see it. So this is what's taking place now. They're trying to get Russia and China involved in this war. And how they're doing it is, I'm sure the Chinese and the Russians are actually in on it. Because they're going to attack Iran very, very soon. And they're saying now they're protecting Iran. Right? They're going to protect it. Well, that's the only reason why you can get them involved in this war. Because they're saying we want to protect them. Okay, so why didn't they do that with Libya and all these other countries? They didn't. They all had business dealings with them. Just like China has business dealings with Libya, didn't it, in Africa? So why suddenly are the Chinese wanting to help the Iranians or the Syrians? Why? Why didn't they do that with Libya? No, it has to be Iran. And they want to bring the Chinese in on it, right? And you know what, armed forces are scattered all over the place. So they say, well, how come we're fighting another front here with the troops, being scattered all over? But that's exactly what they want. They're not interested really in troops. They just want we're killing each other. And they don't need a standing army anymore because they've got these damn energy weapons. You saw what they can do.
How do you know they've got energy weapons?
Well, like I said, if you watch the towers, how they're brought down, and you can see solid steel girders turn to dust, that's the only thing that can do it.
So, what is John Urwin's prediction for the 2012 events? World War III, the Iranian situation.
I think it's really obvious now. It's not so much a predicting. It's rather obvious. It's in the papers every day now. They're going to war with Iran, and they didn't go to war with Iran, say 3 years ago, because it doesn't suit their timetable. They're satanic. They like things happening on certain days, certain times. This is the time. All the predictions in the Bible they'll make come true. Because the Bible, like I was taught, was it was the blueprint for the New World Order. That's what it is. So all the, if you look at the Bible again, if you think of religion, if you look at the Bible, what does the Bible do? What did Moses do? He went around slaughtering people, drowning them, bringing plagues on them. That sounds very similar to what's happening today, isn't it? He's saying, if you don't do as I tell you, I'll kill your foes bone. I mean, I haven't read up on it. And they brought plagues and floods. And this is what he did. He was just another, you could say another Hitler, if you like.
The war, what should people do? Stuff like that.
Okay. Well, it's not a question of what people should do, really. What I mean by that is, look, there's a war coming, whether we like it or not. And I think it's rather obvious now, isn't it? I mean, it's in the papers just about every day. It's in the news every day. I don't know how many countries we're at war with at the moment, but it's quite a lot. So I don't think we're guessing anymore. I think we're well aware that this is going to take place, and we must get prepared for it. And I prefer not to say too much about that, but, you know, if you get in touch with the right people, we can get prepared for this. We can't stop them. It's
So
not
who is
possible
the
to
right
stop them.
people? I mean, you run Urban Defence Systems.
Yeah, I run Urban's Defence Systems,
And
but
if people contacted you, what would they expect to learn, or what would
well,
they...
it's about survival, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
you know,
you do
that's
survival training.
Yeah, I do survival training, which is, you'll probably find it's different, a lot different from what you would get, you know, from other special forces.
So why would they come to you rather than somebody else? What's your unique sales pitch for people to come to Urban Defence Systems?
Well, you saw the type of training I did. You've heard about the type of training I did.
Well, from the point of view of this tape, in this soundbite, could you explain that?
Well, again, we don't want to give too much away. You know, obviously that's the
Yeah,
the
but
object.
why are people going to want to knock on your door at all? What's going to be the main reason why people are going to want to knock on John Urwin's
Well, if you
door?
want to survive, if you really want to survive, come to me. That's all I can say. That's all I'm prepared to say.
And why would they need to survive?
Well, that's entirely up to them. If they want to survive.
I mean,
I mean, there's going to be a
hunky-dory.
war. Listen, again, if you go back, 18 months ago, they were preparing for a nuclear bomb attack in London, and they spent £2 million on the emergency services, and they even had a picture in the mail of a nuclear device going off, and that sounded really far-fetched. How could that happen? Now they're trying to tell you that the Iranians can reach England now, can reach America with a nuclear device. Does that not seem rather strange to you? They were practicing for it. Now it's happening, like 7/7. The emergency service were practicing for the exact same scenario, and it took place on the same day. You know, work it out yourself.
So these are inside jobs. So are you saying that you are still fighting this so-called Illuminati elite?
Well, if you're talking about physically fighting them, no. I'm not physically fighting anybody. But there is ways around it. And really, that's all I'm prepared to say. But there are ways of dealing with this. So, you know, that's up to the people. That's up to them who want to survive or are convinced it's going to happen. Because I don't think a lot of people are convinced it's going to happen. Because, like you say, they've been programmed, they've been brainwashed to think a certain way, and that's why we're in the trouble we're in, because of that. This is why this scenario is taking place, because we've done nothing about it. Because, you know, people thought it wouldn't happen. You need to open your mind up to what's really going on.
And what is really going on?
Well, as you say, they keep on mentioning a Third World War. So I'll leave that up to you, what you think you should do about it. I can help. That's all I can say. That's all I'm prepared to say. But there is ways around it. There is ways of surviving anything. It's not me just saying it anymore. Everybody's talking about the Third World War. Everyone is. At least, you know, it's in the newspapers. What more evidence do you want? How much more proof do you want? And how long are you going to wait? You know, just look at the evidence. It's there. It's everywhere. Look at America. Concentration camps, FEMA coffins, concrete coffins, doomsday sea vaults. Look it up. It's there. The evidence is there. They're doing something. They're not doing all this for nothing. We are at war with all these countries, aren't we? Or is this just a figment of my imagination? Is this just a dream? That we didn't just take over Libya, Iraq, and all these other countries. This is real. This is really happening. We've got to wake up. Are we going to do the same as what we did during the last war? Just check up on what people did during the last war.
You're referring to World War II.
World War II. Right up till the day it took place, people didn't believe it was going to take place. Right up to the day they were dropping bombs, believers. That's exactly what. There's no excuse for that these days. They didn't have the ability to communicate like we have today during the 1930s. In fact, when I think back to the 1930s, all I remember was a radio, Ready Fusion, I think it was, one station, one program. We didn't have television sets, so there's no excuse for people not knowing what's happening. It's out there, it's in front of you, so do something about it. Don't wait until it's too late. That's all I've got to say.
Well, thank you very much, John Urwin, 2012. Thank you for the update. God bless.